Go for it. Go for
Okay, Nathaniel, he's already up, so.
She knows the first name, I trust the question.
Go ahead.
Rubio, this question's for you, uniquely because of your 2012 convention speech where you talked about your father and your mother. And immigration, I work a lot with a lot of people doing immigration stuff, okay? And my biggest problem I'm dealing with is that people are limited from the place of origin because of how many years you have to be here to do legal, to be legal, to do it legally. It's 30 years, 35 years, $30,000. And we also need to separate place of origin from legal and illegal immigration because they're mixing it all. Everyone from this area is all illegal. That's not true. There's a lot of, and then also the cultural significance of people from Latin America and their conservative values in reality. And I think that most of these people are coming here because of the rule of law that the United States has, and that's what they're wanting to live under. And that we need to change this narrative to correct it. To these people are human, they need to be treated with dignity, and what the Biden administration is doing is definitely not dignitary towards any of these people. And that we need to do work to make legal immigration affordable and reasonable for everybody. And my next question is, what is it like to work for my most favorite person in the federal government, Joni Ernst?
Well, so she's actually, she's now part of our Senate leadership. And one of the things she's really done, which doesn't get a lot of attention or coverage, is she's really modernized the way that Republicans communicate with their constituents in the broader country, both in the use of all the new media and the ability to drive messages. That stuff matters, because ultimately what you stand for is important, but you also got to be able to talk about it. One of the great successes of Ronald Reagan wasn't just his policies, but his ability to communicate it to people in a way that they understood and could rally around. And she's really been instrumental in sharpening our ability to communicate as a conference. So it's been great to watch her do it, because that way, I just get the benefit from all the work without having to do actually.
She's the reason I'm actually a Republican.
Well, that's great. That's a good reason to be a Republican. And on your first question, let me say this. And I said this to a group last night. I live this stuff every day. Like, I always chuckle when I get lectured to about immigration from people. Like, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll run into my neighbors who are from the Caribbean, who are immigrants. And then I'll go to the coffee shop I like to go to run by Cuban Americans, and the gas station run by a Colombian family, and the dry cleaner run by a family from Honduras. And these are all people that came from somewhere else. And let me tell you, these are some of the most patriotic people in the world. These are if you go to these people and tell them America's a terrible country, they'll look at you like you're nuts. Because people who have lived somewhere else know how special what we have here is. So I don't think that's the debate. It never has been. America, to this very day, throughout the Trump years, admitted about 1 million people a year became Americans every year legally. And no other country in the world even comes close to that. This is the difference between chaos and order. That's what we're debating here. The difference between chaos and order. We talked about the PPP program a moment ago to help small businesses. We didn't just announce the PPP program and say, okay, if you're a small business, just show up at 7 a.m. and come get your check. You had to apply, you had to prove you were a small business. Minimum bureaucracy, but you had to go through some steps to at least confirm that you're not just somebody claiming to have a small business, here's your free money. That's true for everything. You can work your whole life and you're entitled to Social Security and Medicare, but you got to fill out some forms before you get it. You can't just show up at the federal government building and say, hey, give me my cash. There's a process for everything, for everything. You want to get a vaccine, that they're telling you go get a vaccine, you can't just show up at a hospital, kick down the door and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm here for my 8th vaccine. Okay, there's a process for it. Except for immigration. Somehow these people believe that our immigration law should be as follows. We should have some laws, they should be on the books, but generally speaking, as long as, if you arrive here and you get here, you get to stay, no questions asked. That's not compassion, that's chaos. That's chaos. The flip side of it is what you've pointed to, and that is, you still have these laws on the books and they make no sense either. It is easier to come here illegally than it is to come legally. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's easier. So we've created this perverse incentive. So our view is simple. Immigration needs to be something that's fair, but good for America. At the end of the day, our immigration laws exist for the purposes of our country. It infuses us with people that are hungry to live, not just in freedom, but in opportunity. It's what has continued to fuel. I assure you that there isn't a person in this room that if you went back far enough will not find a relative or an ancestor that came from somewhere else because they couldn't be who God made them to be in the nation of their birth. But there was this place where it didn't matter where they came from, how poor they were when they were born, or whether they had any connections. They could go as far as their talent and their work will take us. And the continuing feeding of our country of that energy is one of the things that makes us special. And all we're saying is, yes, but it has to be through a process. We have to know who you are. We have to know why you're coming. And that process needs to change from time to time. Today, that process needs to be more driven by merit and less by family connection. Doesn't mean it'll be zero family connection, but when you apply to come into the United States legally, the primary criteria in the 21st century needs to be what skill, what business, what skill are you bringing, what talent do you have, what training do you have, what job will you fill. It can't just be, okay, you get to come because your cousin or your brother or your sister are already here. It can no longer be the primary thing. And you talk about per country quotas, that what you're talking about in some, I think that's what you were alluding to. We have as part of our law a notion that we have to, X number have to be from each of these countries. So it doesn't matter if you have, a bunch of people from a certain country that are prepared to come through the merit. Once you hit the cap for that country, no more people can come in from that country. Meanwhile, we have to hit the quota numbers on all these other countries so that we're fair and equitable and that it's all spread around. That's not, our immigration policy does not exist to help the world. It exists to help America. It has a 200 some odd year history of helping America. And properly structured, it could do it again. But it all begins by having a process. And you can't have a process if the rules of that process are not enforced. And what we have now at the southern border of the United States is complete and utter chaos. It's inhumane and it's cruel. We are luring children and vulnerable people into a journey in the hands of these horrifying criminal organizations who traffic in people, who charge their relatives $5,000 or $10,000 to sneak them and their families into this country and abuse them along the way. That's what we're doing with the policies that the Biden administration has put in place. It is utter and complete chaos, and it has turned something that we have long been proud of into an albatross around our nation's neck. So it all begins by having a process that works, that's good for our country, and that the rules are enforced. You get that right, and then the other parts become easier to address. But these guys are not interested in getting it right. They like the chaos for some reason. And they have radicals in their base who basically believe that borders shouldn't even exist. That people should be allowed to live in any country in any world they want. And there isn't a nation on earth that agrees with that. Not Europe, not Canada, not even Mexico agrees with that. And neither should we.
With the Supreme Court recently declaring the Remain in Mexico law, how soon will that be enforced?
Okay, well, and we do know, okay, so the administration has to go back to the Remain in Mexico policy, which was negotiated by the Trump administration and largely decreased the number of people that were coming across our borders illegally. So it was a great plan, again, negotiated in the past administration. And on day one, President Biden then said no more Remain in Mexico policy, which immediately opened the floodgates of illegal immigrants coming across our borders. So that has been reversed, and I'm assuming it has to go back into place immediately. But we'll see how this transpires and what they do through congressional means to try and get rid of the policies of the past. Senator Rubio is correct in that it's basically a free-for-all at our southern border. And I believe in June, and I haven't seen updated stats recently, but in June alone, there were over 212,000 contacts by our Border Patrol with illegal immigrants coming into the country. 212,000 in a month. So we are struggling right now with the crisis at our southern border. But instead of focusing on the crisis at the southern border, instead of focusing on counterterrorism and the debacle in Afghanistan, instead of focusing on our economy and trying to climb out of COVID, the administration is too busy arguing with governors over mask mandates. With everything we have going on in our country that needs to be addressed at the federal level, President Biden is trying to distract from all these crises by targeting our governors. And that's just the broader failings of the federal government leadership right now. So the Remain in Mexico policy is one part that's been corrected for now, but we'll see where President Biden takes it in the near future.
Yeah, I just have a really quick observation. I find it really stunning that people would pay $5,000 or $10,000 and risk their lives to sneak into such a systemically racist country. I just find that stunning. I don't know. Maybe somebody hasn't told them yet.
Joni alluded to earlier the debacle, as she put it, of the Afghanistan retreat. It's now August 31st. From what we've seen in the past, DC, it's forgotten. It's over now. We're out of there. Let's move on. I would love to have you two, and I'm sure you will, pledge that the amount of technology, armament that we left there will not be forgotten, that those that allowed this to happen, when they had 6 months to either remove it or destroy it, are not let off the hook all the way from the White House, the Oval Office, to the Pentagon. This is an issue. These arms will be used against us. They will kill Americans. They will be sold to foreign governments, and technology will be sold to fund terrorism in the future. And we need never forget this. And I just hope you hold the irons to the fire in DC on this issue and not let it end with August 31st.
Well, and Joni can speak more on authority than I can because she's on armed services. Obviously, she's a combat veteran and she really knows this. I can tell you from my perspective as the former chairman and now vice chairman, but hopefully chairman again, if we win more elections, of the Intelligence Committee, that we're not going to be able to forget this. Because what has happened now is two things. The first is you're going to hear reports on a regular basis of the terrible and horrible things being done to people who were left behind. And so that's going to become a daily unfortunate accounting and reminding, and that's tragic. And the other is what you've alluded to, which is the equipment. But here's the third. What has happened now is you have this, the Taliban, you know, they may have, and people say they won the war, they didn't win a war, they basically took over what we left behind. But what will happen now, unfortunately, and it's what we've been talking about with them from the very beginning, is you have a massive country. This is a big space. And we forget why we went in there in the first place. We told the Taliban, the guys that did 9/11 are hanging out in caves in your country. Kick them out so we can get our hands on them. The Taliban said no. We said fine, then we're going to go and get them ourselves. And we did. The Taliban tried to fight us off, so we had to beat them. And that's what the invasion of Afghanistan was about. It wasn't about turning it into Belgium. It was about getting after Al-Qaeda. Those guys are coming back. Al-Qaeda's coming back, and now their cousins in ISIS are coming back. And they've got this huge amount of space in which they can now train, recruit, and plot against us. Because these terrorist groups, they succeed, they need safe havens. They need space, they need territory where they can operate without having, an airstrike kill them. To be able to mass groups of people, recruit, raise money, put out propaganda, and plot against us. And now they've got a place to do it from. And Al-Qaeda's the Taliban's gonna let them do it. Certainly, and Al-Qaeda's gonna let them do it. And I think ISIS is going to be able to do it from there and other groups as well. So we're not going to be able to forget, unfortunately, because this has now created a counter-terror crisis that we are going to be confronting in the near future once again after years of progress on that war.
Yeah, and Andy, we do have an issue with equipment that has been left behind. And what I find very interesting is that when we were going through the process, months and months ago, we were advised in the Armed Services Committee, those of us that would have those conversations about how many plane loads, C-17s of equipment was coming out of Afghanistan. The retrograde operations, these are the pieces of equipment, but never did anyone allude or share with us how much was actually being left behind. It's kind of like the plane loads of people coming out of Afghanistan. Well, great, we can revel in hundreds, 100,000 civilians being evacuated out of Afghanistan, but what about the people that were left behind? How many C-17s of equipment came out of Afghanistan? Wow, that's really great. But what about the equipment that was left behind? Now, much of it was left for the ANDSF, the Afghan National Security Defense Forces, but they obviously were forced to walk away. You either turn over your arms or we're killing your family. Many of those fighters just put down their arms and walked into the night. So now we do have a situation where the Taliban has taken over those arms. Al-Qaeda has those arms. Most of them are mortal enemies of the United States. So yes, we are in a bad situation there. But I think at this point, you know, we can't reflect on that. We've got to move forward. So what do? How do we get that equipment back? If there is a way to now go in and destroy any equipment, if it's possible to do an airstrike, I don't know. You know, that's something we have to sit down and have conversations with our leaders about. And they have some pretty big explanations that they need to give to us as well. But it's an excellent point, Andy.
We can take one
Thank
final
you.
question.
Okay, yes, right here. Thank you, sir.
As a fellow veteran, having served with you, we sent you off back in the early 2000s. The military leadership was really looked upon to be great people, use common sense, and now we understand, of course, that the military leadership at the highest level in the Biden administration, of course, is following, you know, his lead or whoever's leading up there, whatever going on. But the military leadership that allows this stuff to happen, senior military leadership, we got great soldiers, sailors, airmen, you know, we got all these great soldiers. How are we going to get people to join the military when we got this leadership that can't even, I mean, they don't use any common sense. We expect, you and I expect our leaders to not only do what they're told to do, but to do the right thing. And I don't see that. I see our senior leadership as really deteriorating, and I think it's really sad.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That is a great commentary on what the American people are feeling right now as well towards our military leadership. And what we have seen is so many failings coming from the very top, our commander-in-chief, and the constraints that he put upon our military. This is another area that we are going to have to delve into, and we need explanations. Who knew what, when, what advice was given to our commander-in-chief, what options were given to President Biden by our military leaders, and did President Biden, did he outright say, no, we're not doing any of that, we're doing it my way or the highway? We don't know that because our military leaders have not been out there expressing it. And I understand, we know, you know, this is the chain of command and you're not supposed to show disrespect. But you know what, you don't have to show disrespect, you can disagree. And that's where I think the American people really want to know and understand, did our military leaders disagree? What was their best advice provided to the commander-in-chief? And was it solely on the commander-in-chief's shoulders when he said, no, we're not going to maintain Bagram, the airfield there? Was it on him when he said, we're pulling out 2,500 troops before we get civilians out? Who made those decisions? Was it our military leaders or was it President Biden? But I think right now, because I'm discouraged, I am really discouraged. And I had one of my daughter's best friends out at West Point. Her father also served a lifetime in the military. And he said to me how disappointed he was with all of this going on in Afghanistan. And he said, you know what? Most of our military leaders now, they have been in so long, they've become political machines, not military leaders. And when they become more of a politician than a military leader, are they really giving the best advice for those men and women that are on the ground serving in uniform? The best military advice in the best interests of our United States of America? Are they? I don't know that they are. And so this is something that in the upcoming weeks we will be delving into. Guaranteed that. We will delve into that. The focus right now, however, still needs to remain on how do we get our American citizens and our allies out of Afghanistan? And I still haven't heard a clear answer from the president or our military leaders.
I don't have much to add. Just I wanted to address a point that you raised, sir, because the other day I saw this. These fact checkers. I love these guys. These guys are geniuses, and so they're the fact check. I forgot who it was. One of these publications. I didn't even read it. I just saw it posted somewhere. It said it's not true that we left $80 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. That is false. It was only $20 billion. So I feel much better, so how stupid that is, but that's how they write. And your point is a really important one. Just to remind everybody, our country, we have civilian command of the military. Ultimately, I mean, the combat decisions, the strategic decisions are largely made at the military level, but the directional decisions come from a commander-in-chief, a civilian. And I want to be frank with you guys, and I wish this weren't true. I want to be frank. Joe Biden wanted to have a press conference on September 11th where he argued the war in Afghanistan's over, we're out, it's finished, Americans are home, big success, check mark. That's what he wanted. And that's the pressure he put on them. Get me out by the 11th. When the Taliban they cut off Kabul. Taliban, because we stopped doing airstrikes, the Taliban for the first time in years was able to mass forces. They couldn't mass forces when we were hitting them from the air. Now they can mass forces. And the Afghan armed forces were no match for that. They didn't have the same passion, the same dedication. Some of them weren't even being paid on a regular basis. They took off the uniform and said, we're out of here. When they cut off Kabul, there was no way to supply. They were under siege. And the leaders said, hold on a second, we can't get fuel, we can't get food, these guys have cut us off, I'm on the next flight out of here. They left, and once they left, it all came apart. The Taliban wasn't ready. They marched into Kabul, and they were like, oh my gosh, there's nobody here. Where's the police? And there are reports now that they reached out to the U.S. government and says, hey, why don't you guys secure Kabul? We're not ready for it. And the U.S. government said, no, we just want the airport. We just want the airport. Those are decisions that are made because we have to get out by 9/11 because Joe Biden has to have his press conference, just like he had his 4th of July, New Independence Day press conference on COVID. A couple weeks later, we found out, well, guess what? You got to wear a mask even if you're vaccinated. So, but that's really what we're dealing with here, guys. That's the seriousness of it.
It is too good.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Senator Rubio and Senator Ernst, for being here with us today this morning. Before we wrap up, a couple quick things. Just want to thank everybody for attending.